Katoa, I am going to start us off with a karakia. Please join me in this. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hiaki ana te ata kura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. I declare the meeting open. Welcome, no mai haere mai, to today's extraordinary Te Kaunihera o Pōneke Council meeting. Please let me or Alessi know if you need to leave or have anything you need to raise. Apologies, we have none. I probably don't need to move that, eh? No. There are no announcements by the Mayor. Are there any conflicts of interest? No. There are no items not on the agenda, and therefore we move to public participation. So I just want to welcome everyone in the room, at the back there in the gallery. It's great to have you here. While people are speaking, I ask that you just keep quiet so that we can hear them speak and give them respect. I now welcome a representative from Unions Wellington to either the podium or the top of the table here, and you can speak for 10 minutes, and that includes questions as well. Thank you.
So, kia ora koutou, I'm Sabina, I'm from Unions Wellington, I'm one of the co-conveners, and we're here speaking again to once again show that there is strong opposition from Wellingtonians against the sale of our airport. I wanted to do a little thing where we called out everyone that was here, but unfortunately we've got a lot of people in overflow rooms. So I'm just going to read through the names of the people who are here representing their various organisations within the umbrella of Unions Wellington. So we have people here from Air 2, people here from A1s, people here from the CTU, people here from NZEI, people here from Unite Union, people here from VUSA, people here from RMTU, people here from MUNS, people here from PSA, people here from Working Students Wellington, and people here from Aotearoa Illegal Workers Union. All here alongside Unions Wellington showing opposition to selling the stake that we own in Wellington Airport. So Unions Wellington launched this campaign at the Newtown Market earlier this year, Keep the Airport Ours. We talked to hundreds of people that day, and it was clear even then that the public was strongly opposed to selling the stake in Wellington Airport. We ran a public forum on the sale in April. We heard from our allies at Climate Clinic at that time about the environmental risk of the lack of public control over polluting industries, and we heard from Craig Rennie from the CTU about the various incorrect economic assumptions that the case to sell were based on. We received public commitments from councillors to vote against the sale at that time. We ran a scientific poll which showed a majority in every ward were opposed to the sale. 74% of Wellingtonians were opposed. We submitted against the sale in the consultation for the long-term plan, and we turned out again at the vote for the long-term plan to show our opposition to the sale. And here we are again. There's another chance, and everyone makes mistakes, but we think that you should vote against the sale today. Ashok from Unions Wellington is now going to do a bit more of a substantive speech.
Yeah, kia ora, and thanks again for the opportunity to speak on this. I did think I'm Ashok Jacob, I'm on the Committee of Unions Wellington. I thought for a while about what I was going to say here, and I don't want to do you the disservice of saying things you've already heard me or others say. A lot of people have said a lot of things about this issue, but it got me thinking about what we've already said during our campaign and the points that we've had to respond to. When we first approached a lot of our nominal allies on the council about this issue, we were told that our input was essential in solving the problem and that we needed to provide ideas and support. We heard that the sale was something that nobody really wanted to do, but no feasible alternatives had been found. We're a small volunteer organisation run by passionate, young and, to be honest, green as in inexperienced, not green people. Looking back, the idea that we could provide any more insight on the complex details of this issue than the council itself, an organisation with a 1.5 billion yearly budget and 2,500 staff, is somewhat laughable. That's why, looking back with a more cynical lens, it made sense when we found out that the council had actually not seriously explored alternative options. The key documents purported to justify the sale A couple of brief reports prepared by consultants rely heavily on the council's internal logic which can easily be transplanted to advocate for selling the stadium, which is considered in the first EY report, which points as a major difference between essentially the only major difference between the stadium and the airport being that the airport is a good financial investment. We were told that all other options had been exhausted when in fact very little attempt was made to solve any of the purported problems without the airport sale. Looking at the problems themselves, we were told that the council was required to insure itself to the standard of a 1 in 1,000-year event based on guidance from the OAG. As far as we could find, no such guidance exists. We were told that we can't have all of our eggs in one basket, but Wellington isn't a financial portfolio. It's an immovable physical place with people and houses and essential public infrastructure that can't just be picked up and placed somewhere it'll perform better. We were told that without a sale, council would face more expensive credit and a potential downgrade from Standard & Poor's. That happened anyway, and in the council's words, will have no impact on the cost of borrowing, obviously, because they borrow from the local government funding agency. We were told that without the sale, there would have to be spending cuts, despite explicit assurance to the contrary in the LTP consultation document. Even if this is true, and new information has since been found, the question surely then is, what would you cut? We believe, and we think that Wellington is behind us in this, that it's better to have a democratic conversation about priorities during tough times than selling assets. We're now facing another distraction, the legal and logical basis of which is falling away in real time. Some have told us that it's actually more complicated than we think, that it's more of a swap than a sale, and questioned whether it's really privatization if it's not to pay down debt. Our position remains the same as our forefathers in the 1980s, and is the same position as the Dunedin residents who successfully stopped the sale of their local lines company this year, or the Christchurch activists who stopped the privatisation of the council-owned services company CCHL. Ownership is about control, and those who think it's more complicated than we do have questioned whether our shareholding in the airport really provides control. We've been quite clear on why we think this is wrong, and why that even if we haven't tried in the past, that's not prescriptive for the future. It's true that council's current board appointments don't seem to be interested in getting what's best for the city out of the airport. But that's no argument for giving up the ability to appoint new people. Even if we're wrong, and we really have zero control or influence over the airport company, then 34% is a better starting point than zero, and at least we get the dividends out of it. One of the questions that's frustrated me in particular is the failure to ask cui bono, who benefits. The fact that the airport shareholding returns dividends consistently through recessions, and that the airport is a natural monopoly. Side note, I don't know if we addressed this in our original consultation, but I wanted to talk about the New Plymouth Investment Fund, which was one of the models for the plan that was put forward. One of the things that we found out after the consultation actually is that the amount of money that was put into the New Plymouth Investment Fund immediately tanked to almost zero because the global financial crisis hit pretty much immediately. And we're almost 20 years later and it's yet to return to its opening balance. And the airport provided returns consistently through that same recession. So that's something to think about. The fact that the airport shareholding returns dividends consistently through recessions and that the airport itself is a natural monopoly makes it a tantalizing investment for the company that nabs the shares. As is consistently highlighted actually in the consultancy reports, one of the reasons that they singled out the airport among the other assets that the council owned is that it's such a good investment for whatever lucky company manages to get those shares. Infratil might stand to gain absolute power over an essential piece of public infrastructure. Infratil is no friend of the workers, no friend of Wellington's workers, as was demonstrated during the 2022 bus lockout by NZ Bus. And we believe it to be fundamentally unfair that the profits of any essential natural monopoly would sit in trusts and the bank accounts of wealthy investors. CK Hutchison, another name that's been floated around in terms of a potential buyer for the shares, is a Hong Kong-based investment multinational, which has an entire business model based on extracting profit from public infrastructure. They might stand to gain and extend their already significant influence in the Wellington region, given that they already own Wellington's local electricity network. This question started as a question of asset sales and public ownership. Whether it's decided today or in December or in 2025 or whenever, I hope it will finish as one. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions ready to go. Councillor Free.
Yes, so your scientific poll does show quite different results from our survey, which was, very different. Ours showed much more support. Can you explain the methodology behind that poll?
Not off the top of my head, because we contracted a company to do it. But I would say that the LTP consultation document clearly identified a preferred outcome. And there's information that has subsequently been proved to not be as true as maybe it was presented that was in that LTP consultation document.
Okay.
Councillor Calvert.
Two questions, please. The first question is, what's your understanding of the debate today? Do you believe it's about whether the council should proceed with selling the shares or not?
Yes, that's our understanding of it.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing is, thank you for your speech, because I think you covered off quite a few things. That was really good. Would you be willing for us to be able to table that speech if you have notes? And we could add that to the minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Final question from Councillor Abdurrahman.
So regardless to the public support in keeping public strategic assets, could you please tell us a breakdown of ward by ward, or if it's just like only one ward that is supporting, and what that looks like in general as well?
Noting you have about 15 seconds to go.
There was a majority in every ward. We did publish the results of the poll on various social media, including our Instagram, which people can look into for detail. It was 74% across the Wellington region, going higher and lower in a few different wards. I think it was highest in the southern ward, which is yours.
Thank you, Unions Wellington. Appreciate your time. I now welcome Paul Ridley-Smith to come and speak. You do have 5 minutes, which includes questions.
I'll just wait till those are circulated. I provided that to Democracy Services last evening, but unfortunately they weren't circulated as it should have been. However, I know that some councillors have got it, and I know that Beth has also got it. Right, so I'm Paul Ridley-Smith. I'm a former Infratel executive, a former director of Wellington Airport, the president of the Oriental Bay Residents Association, but I speak here in my personal capacity. There are 3 matters I cover in the paper. I'm not going to deal with option 1. What I say is part 1. I'm in favour of the sale on economic grounds. It is clearly a sensible, risk-adjusted financial decision to make. The council will be better off financially if the sale proceeds. But there are 2 very big buts. As a long-time Wellingtonian, I am truly appalled by the democratic processes this council has followed in coming to this decision. This is a very simple matter, Your Worship. Today's meeting should involve a substantive resolution of to proceed or not to proceed. Yet councillors have been bamboozled and confused by advice on standing orders, on delegations, on the Local Government Act provisions. And that has done a disservice to Wellington, and it's done a disservice to the citizens. Andrea Vance today has talked about how untethered Wellington is from the key principles of democracy and constitutional probity. Today, the elected members and the elected members alone of this council should make a decision on whether or not to proceed with the sale. And there is a perfectly legitimate legal mechanism to allow that to happen, and I've covered it here in my paper. It's to utilise Section 96 of the Local Government Act and pass a resolution. I don't need to go into that, it's in your paper, read the 96. I now go to part 3. Financially, part of the advice given by council officers on this is sound, but the idea that you can create a perpetual investment fund that will be worth $6.4 billion or $16 billion long after all of us, well, not all of us, most of us in the room are dead and buried, is just a nonsense. There is simply no reasonable and rational basis to think that this fund is the silver bullet. Yes, it's superior to the existing circumstance, I agree with that, but by no means to the extent that is represented by this paper. Rather instead, what the truth of the situation is for this council is that you're in financial peril. Your spending is out of control. You've pushed the rates to the absolute limit. The goose is strangling before us. You need to get hold of your financial performance. And if, in order to do that, we need today to vote no on the sale and force you back to a process where you are responsible about the finances of the city, then so be it. I'll take questions.
I'm not seeing any questions. Councillor, all the hands come up. Won't be a tick. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, I guess just a quick question. Do you think that councillors in the drafting of this motion should have been pointed to the provisions of Section 80 and Section 97 within the LGA?
I have to say, and I don't mean to be too critical, I think that when you raised the issue in June about I want to substantially debate this issue, a neutral civil service would have assisted councillors to say that if that is the will of the body, here is a process that you can follow to allow that substantive discussion and vote to be had. It might pass, it might fail. Everything I have seen has been unhelpful in allowing councillors to know how to substantively approach this issue.
I'm going to take one more question. Put your hands up again. Councillor Pennant.
Thank you, Paul, for your consideration. I'm just wondering, when we have public assets, everyone owns it in the public by birthright, whereas you're talking about privatising it, which means that only some people can access it if they've got the money. How is that?
Well, if you're prepared to pay the car park and you go and sit in the car park there. No, I don't agree with that at all. Look, I'm an economic dry rot, although here I am for the first time since about 1982, possibly siding with the union movement. I find it's almost impossible to contemplate. But the reality is, it would just be a smarter thing and a better thing for the finances of Wellington to have a New Zealand super type fund. And quite frankly, Infratil can if they want to screw the council over, quite frankly, they can. Your minority shareholding is just that. And luckily to date, they haven't. But trust me, one day a capital raise is coming and you won't have the money to pay the call. And Auckland City has had that done to it twice in the last 4 years.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
It's great to have you. We've now come to the end of public participation, but at this time I'd like to invite our Tākai Here partners up to share their whakaaro. So I welcome Karapuka Tapu from Taranaki Whānui. And please, of course, sit at the front of the table.
Forced me to move away from it. Get my camera.
Needs to go. I'm just going to take an adjournment for 2 minutes. Security, can we... Karapuka Tapu and his associates to speak to council.
Ko tēnei nā te mihi atu rā kia koutou, a o ti anō rā kia tātou katoa, ki tō tātou ne koro matua o Pōneke, nei rā ka tuku mihi atu rā kia koutou, kia koe. I spent the morning sort of dithering on some thoughts about this discussion that you as councillors are having today with regards to this notice of motion. And here are my ditherings. To me, today's meeting highlights a fundamental issue plaguing our city, a failure of unity, a failure of kotahitanga, and a clear absence of cohesive and collective leadership. When leadership is fragmented, when there is no shared vision or direction, our collective ability to achieve meaningful and lasting outcomes evaporates. What we end up with is paralysis, stagnation, and matters that remain unresolved. And what happens when things remain unresolved? It creates a space for personal attacks, where the focus shifts from addressing the real issues to playing political games at the expense of others. It's no longer about resolving matters in the best interests of our city. It's about individuals becoming pawns in a larger game of positioning and power. In this instance, we, Taranaki whānui, your tākaihere partners, are once again the people trying to be played. And that, my friends and colleagues, is a truly disappointing reality. But such is the consequence of a lack of unity, a lack of cohesion, a lack of collective leadership that holds our shared interest at its core. Taranaki whānui knows a great deal about unity and just as much about the lack of it, actually. If you followed our journey and read the numerous articles from journalists like Tom Hunt behind us, you'll know our story and how unfamiliar it is. We have faced the same trials and tribulations experienced by many entities, by many iwi across Aotearoa. A story of prosperity, a story of growth, but also of loss, fragmentation, and rebuilding again. This is the narrative of navigating through our own turmoil, of finding strength, of learning, of unlearning and relearning. As Taranaki whānui, our leadership has been strong at times, and it has faltered at other times. But what remains steadfast in our commitment to the values that guide us are our raukura, which is our symbol of unity, peace, and hope. It is this commitment that grounds us and propels us forward as a collective, even when the winds of adversity threaten to push us back. The late Māori king showed us what true leadership looks like. When a wave of anti-Māori and anti-tiriti sentiment swept across the nation, many feared what might come. But our Māori king held firm. He did not get dragged into reactive politics or wade into each issue as it arose. Instead, he rose above it all. He offered hope when others saw despair. He set a path forward when others could not see a path. He elevated our collective wairua, not just Māori, but everyone. He showed that leadership is not about reacting to every blow, but about standing tall, remaining steadfast, and bringing people together. And that is what I call a masterclass in leadership. Closer to home, within our very city, we have leaders, elected appointed, and those who have emerged from our communities. They're all here today. We're all here today. Who work tirelessly to uphold the very fabric of who we are as a city, as the capital city within our beautiful nation. They are out there, we are out there, day in, day out, keeping our communities together, feeding our people, housing our families, supporting our businesses, and more recently, and what becomes a very common sign is keeping our government to account. These leaders embody the essence of kotahitanga. Yet their voices and actions are too often drowned out by the disunity and the lack of collectivism within our council. It's disheartening to witness a breaking down of the spirit of kotahitanga within our city's leadership, within the council. The lack of collective unity, the lack of cohesion is actively undermining the efforts and hard work of many leaders, groups, and individuals within our city who are desperately trying to keep things together. Our city is calling out for us as leaders to rise above the noise, set aside agendas, and mobilize the immense potential that resides within our people, those who lead it, those who live in it, and those who tirelessly give to our city. Your collective role is to be the city's greatest advocates and champions. But right now, we as Taranaki whānui don't see that. And I question as to whether Wellington sees it. Instead, we see chaos, confusion, and disunity. Let me be clear. I'm not here to speak to the specifics of the notice of motion. In fact, I'm here to speak to the fact that we shouldn't be here speaking to the notice of motion. The very fact that we are here today addressing this matter is a symptom of the lack of leadership and collective responsibility that has led us to this point. Make no mistake, this council will make the decisions as it sees fit. But let it be known, Taranaki whānui is not walking away from our city. We love our city. This is our home. This is the place that we stand. And we stand here in support of our Pauiwi Holden Hohaia and any future Pauiwi we appoint to this role, because it is an important role. Please make your decision on the airport shares. Whether you sell them or keep them, Taranaki whānui does not care. What we care about is that leadership is demonstrated and a decision is made. But if that decision is to be made in a manner that attempts to silence our mana whenua voice, we will and can only see that as a breach of our relationship, of our partnership, and our commitment to each other. There is the hoi over there that symbolizes our tākaihere partnership, our relationship together. Friends and colleagues, the decision is yours. And wherever the vote, and regardless of wherever the vote falls, we are here, and we will continue to be here, leading alongside you, hopefully, alongside of our community, because this is bigger than just a vote. And long after the votes are cast, we will remember, and we will just keep on keeping on, because that's what's required of us. So, marunga nā I tēnā, ka tuku nā tunga mihi kia koutou katoa, kua whakarite, kua whakawātea I tēnei wāhi mo tātou, mo Taranaki whānui, ki te tuku o mātou nei whakaro kia koutou I tēnei rā. Tēnā koutou, ana kia koe e te koromotua, nei rā te mihi atu kia koe, kei a koe.
Kia ora e rangatira. Thank you so much for your words, and know there are many of us who value this partnership and want to see it thrive for the betterment of our council and the betterment of our city. So thank you for that. I am going to invite some questions, if that's okay. Would anyone like to ask any questions? We have heard you loud and clear. Kia ora to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. And we will proceed with this hui.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou.
Kia ora. I now bring us to general business. 2.1, the Wellington International Airport share sale notice of motion. Now, before we get started, I do want to clarify process, because this is obviously a very hefty decision. First of all, I will ask all members and those in the gallery, we must keep this respectful. If I hear any personal attacks, especially towards staff, I will not accept those, and I will run a standing order process, so please keep this respectful. I'm going to automatically extend speeches to 4 minutes, just so we don't need to, interrupt the flow. So firstly, Andrea's going to come and speak to the report. Then I'll open the floor for questions from members. I've mentioned the 4-minute extension. And when it comes to questions, we'll do the whole, ask 3, then we'll move on just to kind of share it around. Questions are also not the opportunity to debate, so please keep your questions relevant and respectful to our officers, and then we'll, move to a good debate. So please, I welcome Andrea Reeves and, of course, Catherine and Beth as well to speak to the report. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. I'm going to start with a few opening remarks and also highlight some of the questions that have been raised through the Q&A, just so that for those of you who may not have had a chance to read the Q&A, I just cover off some of the kind of key matters that were highlighted. So a really important part of the Council's infrastructure and financial strategy, which is currently within the existing LTP, is about considering the risks that we face. And one thing that we have really tried to focus on, and that was a direction from you, was thinking about our resilience as our city. And of course, we continue to get challenged by resilience issues. Sunday's earthquake was a bit of a stark reminder, but I also reflect on the challenges that our southern councils are facing through flooding and events like that as well. And it's really important for us to give you advice around perhaps the unlikely but the catastrophic, so that we can start to address those risks. For some time, long before I started here as the CFO, the Council's received information and reports on the risks that we have faced from an undiversified investment portfolio. And what I would say is that those risks are now becoming issues. And the reason I say that is because not only do we have an undiversified investment portfolio in the airport, we now have a significant insurance gap. And I think that is why we have talked to you about the issues as they are now and reflecting on, having to address that insurance gap. And that has moved from being that risk. I do want to highlight that today's paper is not voting on the sale or not of the airport shares. So the paper here, and we've taken external legal advice to really work through this and try and give the best advice as possible. It is about progressing an LTP amendment. And that's to consider and possibly change our financial strategy to address the issues we face, and that can be an alternative way through that, right? So that is the key thing that this notice of motion is looking to achieve, and that is the advice that we provide. The other alternative is that we continue as planned, That still means that under that scenario, we would still come back to you in December once we have advice on a potential sales strategy, on what the establishment of a perpetual investment fund would look like. We would still be coming back to you with that decision. And at that point in time, that is when you are, as a council, not as a committee, required to vote on whether or not you want to sell this strategic asset. So that is the decision that's being made at this point in time. In undertaking an LTP amendment process, we need to go through the same process that we did when we formed the LTP. We don't have to start from absolute scratch in all the outcome discussions and the visions that we want to achieve as a council, but we do need to fundamentally look at our financial strategy and be really clear on that if the NOM was to be successful today. I touched on the fact that I wanted to raise a number of questions or highlight the answers that we've provided. We have been asked about conflicts of interest. In terms of our advice to you as elected members, conflicts of interest always come down to the decision that is being made on the day. And so the decision today is whether to proceed with an LTP amendment or not. It's not about the sale of the shares. And therefore, we have given advice that no one has a conflict of interest in that particular decision. That will have to be reassessed throughout the process and depending on the decision that is made. And there are mechanisms where elected members would need to consider their involvement going forward. We have been asked whether or not the sale of shares alone and the establishment of a PIF is sufficient. And I think one of the public speakers referred to it as a silver bullet. Absolutely not. This is not the silver bullet, right? We have an insurance roadmap that requires us to do a number of different things. And that is, you cannot just simply address this complex issue with one thing. We're going to be needing to pull these different levers throughout, into the future. However, the establishment of a PIF is by far the biggest lever that we can pull in the most significant and meaningful way that we can to set up a multi-billion-dollar fund. Again, what that looks like in terms of dollar values or billions of dollars, we don't know what that looks like. Again, you need to come up with the parameters that we would create for this fund, but we have modelled different scenarios and provided that to you in previous papers. There has been some questions around the role of auditors in this process, and they need to form a view only on our financial prudence. And they will audit our long-term plan. They will make an assessment of financial prudence within that plan. They have not expressed any views, nor is it their role, because they cannot comment on policy, on whether or not we should be forecasting for a certain event. That is absolutely not the role of the Office of the Auditor General. That they cannot comment on policy like that. But they did complete a piece of work that was tabled in Parliament in 2013, which I may or may not be familiar with, which collected data from 2010 on what different public entities were doing. And they collected that information and they highlighted that there were a number of councils and public entities that had underinsurance. But the Auditor General of the time also said, that is not a question that we as the office should be answering, but the one for public entities themselves. And they noted that significant underinsurance is not necessarily a problem, providing you are considering how you're going to mitigate the risks associated with it. And the two things that they highlighted was either establishing a fund or some significant reserves to be able to address that risk, or by ensuring that you have sufficient debt headroom. And so, in effect, that does align with how we've tried to provide advice to you throughout this process. Lastly, we've also been asked about the 1 in 1,000 year event. The reality is there are numerous different methodologies taken. If we were to use a 1 in 500 year event, we're still going to have an insurance gap. And that is going to continue in the future because obtaining insurance in this environment is becoming harder and harder to get. And we need to start thinking about how we mitigate our risks in a new and different way. And that's entirely what the insurance roadmap is trying to achieve, but equally why we need a big solution. I would just note that the Christchurch City Council forecasts theirs on a 1 in 5,000 year event. And that's in their financial strategy because they have already been through a catastrophic event and they want to ensure that they're being as prudent as they possibly can because they don't want to be faced with that situation again. I'll perhaps leave it there because those were the key thematics coming through the Q&A, but welcome any questions.
Great, thank you. I imagine there will be a few. So I'm going to start with Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Andrea. Thank you.
Kia ora.
My first question is, I did ask this as part of the independent legal advice, but I wanted everyone to know it and to judge it as well. So the question goes like this. Does the full council have the power to amend or make changes to the long-term plan beyond simply adopting or rejecting a committee decision? In other words, if the majority of this council disagree with the LTP committee decision, can they make changes to the LTP at the full council without suspending the delegation?
So can I just highlight process? I'll just highlight process and then I'll perhaps hand over to Beth as well. So a really important point when it comes to the adoption of the long-term plan, you're required to audit, you're not required to audit, that would be a conflict of interest. You're required to adopt the audited long-term plan. And so in doing that, you need to have received an audit opinion from the Auditor General or the delegate on their behalf. And so if you are to make changes between when that's happened and when you go to adopt, they would need to redo the audit process. So there's a really important process point here that has been the reason we have given some of the advice. You must adopt the audited LTP and the auditor must be satisfied with all of the work that they've done. They can't just sort of go, oh, we will change this on the spot. That's not the methodology they can use. They have to follow auditing standards to do that. On the other matter, I'll hand over to Beth.
Kia ora, Councillor. I'm not going to repeat substantively the independent legal advice, but as you know, the advice was very clear that it is not open to Council to simply amend a resolution made by a delegated committee acting under its lawful delegated authority. So that was very clear legal advice that it is simply not open to Council to simply amend a recommendation of the committee, and that advice is consistent with advice I've given previously.
So do you stand by your statement now then? The LTP committee got more power than the council when it comes to making decisions if the council cannot amend any of those decisions.
So the council can amend those decisions. So the committee does not have any more power. The council delegates to the committee. You were welcome when it came to council to reject the committee's decision.
But you got two options, either rubber stamping or rejecting. You cannot make any changes to it.
If the committee has exercised its delegated function, then that is right. You cannot make a change to what they have recommended. You can say it is absolutely open to council to say, we do not like this and we're going to do it ourselves. Absolutely. And it is absolutely open to council to say, we don't like this committee, go back and do it again and issue some direction in the way they do that.
So,
Madam Chair, final question, but I'll put you back on the list.
Yeah. Final question. Here is where it goes. So if the LTP committee can make the decision in suspending the delegations, what you are saying is it doesn't work that way. According to Local Government Act, there are certain things that you are not allowed to delegate. Example, this council got the power to appoint chief executives. You can't delegate that. And approval of long-term plan, annual plan is part of it. So where is that a wording of a wording that we played in the terms of references? In terms of references, where exactly it says we delegated that power, and you cannot
We have not delegated the power. The council is required to adopt the long-term plan, and the council exercised that right and that requirement at the June meeting.
But I would add to say that this council decided to give the long-term plan committee a lot of power when it set up its delegations at the start of this triennium. This council resolved to let the long-term plan committee develop the entire and final long-term plan and recommend to the council for adoption. The council did not retain any powers itself to make decisions in relation to that. It gave everything to the LTP committee, and the LTP committee used that delegation.
Put me back
Can
in
I
there,
have quiet in the... Oh, absolutely, Councillor. Can I please have quiet in the gallery, please? Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. You made a comment about referencing the financial strategy, but in terms of when the notice of motion was being developed, and I know working closely with officers that my colleagues did, there was no mention about the financial strategy, but now it seems to be brought up as a key aspect, and that's what...
Well, the financial strategy is within the long-term plan, Councillor.
I realise that, but when we were developing, when the notice of motion, the content of that was being developed, it was never, there's nothing in there about the financial strategy, and whilst that is the case, I just don't see it being referenced in any way, but yet you bring that up as an important point.
The financial strategy and the infrastructure strategy, and we've provided numerous briefings in the lead up to the long-term plan about those two strategies being the key pillars to the long-term plan itself. And so they're the foundations to the long-term plan. I'm just highlighting the specific reference to where that sits.
Okay. So when this council made a decision to adopt the long-term plan, and as part of that long-term plan, it adopted to agree to sell the shares in the airport. Did any member potentially have a conflict of interest at that point?
No, because the decision on that was to adopt the long-term plan.
So at what point does a member disclose a conflict of interest in respect of a strategic asset?
Yeah, so there's two key thresholds for conflicts of interest. The one is under the Local Authority Members Interest Act, which is the legislation in respect of any financial conflicts of interest. If any member is expected to gain or lose from a financial decision from a decision that the council is making, then they need to be compliant with that piece of legislation. So that's the decision that's being made and whether or not that would trigger a gain or loss. So that's the trigger under the Local Authority Members Interest Act. There are other mechanisms where it can enable councillors to participate, and that's through working with the Office of the Auditor General around getting exemptions or determinations around that. And so certainly that's the advice that we would be talking to those elected members about. There is also the concept of non-financial conflicts of interest or non-pecuniary conflicts of interest, and that would be where your interests would overlap with other roles, responsibilities, family mechanisms, things like that. And that is for the elected member themselves to determine whether or not they have a non-financial conflict of interest.
Final question, Councillor.
I'm just trying to get so in terms of the process, forget about what's happened in the last 3 months, but in terms of that long-term plan that this council signed off, at what point, if there was potentially or perceived a conflict of interest, at what point would an elected member, disclose?
So again, it comes down to whether you've got a pecuniary or a non-pecuniary conflict of interest. There are two separate pieces, those are two separate things under there's law surrounding pecuniary conflicts of interest.
But at what point?
It depends on the decision that is being made. So I would suggest that when the decision to sell shares, that could, that would be a specific decision that could trigger that provision.
So was that?
I'm going to put you back on the list, Councillor.
But I'm sorry, but I haven't had an answer. At what point during the last process of the long-term plan? I haven't actually had an answer. I need to know at what point through this long-term plan process that we've just been through was there a
Councillor
point?
Calvert, officers are continually looking at elected members' declared conflicts and understanding what they've said and as to what their interests are and how that might impact on a decision. I have on numerous occasions had conversations with elected members around this table around possible conflicts of interest and provided advice and guidance on what they should do with regard to that. Other times elected members have come to me or to Stephen MacArthur, and I'm sure to Andrea, in relation to those possible conflicts, and we've provided guidance. So I am confident and strong in my view that we have provided appropriate guidance and advice on the nature of the decision being made to elected members around this table and to elected members and Pōiwi in relation to decisions going forward and what they may need to do in relation to those decisions.
I'll go back on the list because mine's has still not been addressed.
I believe it has been addressed, but and if no, I'm going to ask you to watch your tone, Councillor, and be more respectful to staff, please. You've had your answer, but I will put you back on the list. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, I think it was last week it was reported in the Herald that the cost of sale for the work to December would be about comparable to an LTP amendment, but there wasn't a name put to that, so I'm not quite sure how that information came through. So has anyone in council provided that analysis or that information?
We looked at some of the costs. We don't have all of the costs to sell the shares or do that work at this point in time, but we do know that there will be costs to undertake an LTP amendment. There'll be staff costs, there'll be consultation associated with that. We have done rough back of the envelope numbers, but that's all we've done.
Okay, so there's been some work internally to help.
Yeah, just rough.
So I guess because I emailed on the 29th of July asking for the estimated costs for the December vote, and all I got at that point was a small part of 8 million would be incurred. So I guess there's been work done since my email. I just wasn't looped back into getting an answer from that. Is that what's happened?
I'm not sure. Sorry, Councillor, I wasn't aware that that was the response. I don't think.
Okay, so, all right. Third question, if this motion passes without clause 3, which I do understand is the intention of the mover, can you just speak about what steps would mana whenua be included in along the way, if there would be any variation from standard process?
So if that were the case, my understanding is that we would then commence an LTP amendment process, and that is with the intention of not including the sale of the airport and the establishment of the PIF in our financial strategy. We would immediately cease all work on the sale, and our focus and efforts and attention would go on the LTP amendment. That would go through the usual process through the LTP Finance and Performance Committee as currently under the delegations.
Just to be explicit, that's the committee in which the Pōiwi currently sits.
Correct.
So
they sit on all
clause 3,
Yeah,
there would be
absolutely.
no change to standard.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
With clause 3 is removed, sorry. Thank you. Back on the list, please.
Councillor Free.
Thank you. My question really relates specifically to the meaning of the notice of motion. So number one, if agree to commence a process, would that be a process like the normal LTP process where you would bring us options, even if there was even if this passed and it was indicated there was a preferred option, you would still bring alternative options?
Yeah. So under the legislation, we need to look at all reasonably practicable options. And so we would bring those to you, but it would still be up to the committee to decide which one is going to be their preferred option to go out for consultation. And, we would infer through this piece of work that the preferred option is not to sell the shares, and so we would work through with you on that one. Yep.
But that brings me to my second question, which is by 2C. If this group were to direct that no further money was to be spent on establishing a perpetual investment fund, would that be almost predetermination if we were to vote for this now? Because wouldn't that be one of the options you'd still be looking into?
Well, we wouldn't. Through this, we've been asked to look at amending the LTP. It wouldn't be prudent for us to continue to spend money on that as an option. I don't think it's predetermination at all, because we'd still have to work through what is going to be the LTP Finance and Performance Committee's preferred options.
And then just to clarify something around Councillor Calvert's questioning, my understanding is at the moment the position we're in is we've invited in the real estate agent, so to speak, to give us some ideas about what might happen if we were to want to sell. But we have not yet made a decision.
No, that decision...
Because we would need to know a bit more about the price.
That's right. We need expertise to give you advice on this. We don't sell assets on a frequent basis here.
So just getting back to conflict of interest, at the moment, the decisions that we've made are about...
Excuse me, sorry, Councillor. I'm going to ask the gallery again. Can you please keep things respectful and quiet, especially when we're doing this process? Thank you.
Sorry, I have lost the train of my thought. So to date, the decisions haven't really been... They've been about information gathering and a preferred approach, but they haven't yet involved anyone in actually who might have a conflict of interest in actually making a decision to sell.
Correct. What we have done is we have procured experts who have got expertise in selling assets, and also we're looking to undertake, well, we've completed a procurement exercise, it hasn't been completed yet, to bring in advisors on what we could do through the establishment of a perpetual investment fund. That has been the work that's been completed. They will undertake that work to bring advice to the council under the current LTP to the council in December, so that provides you with the facts and the information around how you, or if you wish to proceed.
Final question, Councillor.
In your view, is there likely to be, do we have a firm view on what the price might be, or are we still really uncertain?
Uncertain.
Okay. So we don't yet know what we're talking about. Yeah, thanks.
So we would have a excuse me. We would have a full independent, robust valuation process done as part of the development of the sales strategy, and we would bring that back in December when we report back, and that sales strategy would cover who the potential buyers or where the potential interest might come from, the strength of that interest, different options for the way in which we might sell to them, and some indication of the price range, and all of that would go into your decision about whether or not you want to proceed.
Including partial sale options?
Yes, we've asked for advice on the pros and cons of a partial sale and what that might do to the level of interest in the market and what it might do to the potential price.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pennant.
Thanks for your work. So the airport's one of the biggest polluters in the city, and so apart from the ETS and depending what a government of the day might do, if we sell the shares, what control do we have over that polluting?
Yeah, I would suggest it's the same that we have now as a regulator.
As a regulator. Beth, the next question is for you around the delegation. So obviously I've seen the legal advice. So my understanding, long history in local government, is that council has absolute power. It is not, it can't, so it has this power, it's not restricted, and yet the advice that's come back is saying that it is restricted. And also that I understand that delegations are essentially permissive. So, you know, when we do something, we should be able to say, well, okay, that's great, we've got your advice, but we don't agree with it. So I'm just trying to reconcile those two things with the advice that we've got. If you could just elaborate on that.
And I totally acknowledge that that is a commonly held view, and it feels like council should be able to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. But that is not the way the law works. And the law expressly says that, both in standing orders, but more importantly in the Local Government Act, that nothing in the Local Government Act gives the council the ability to change a decision made under delegation by a committee, right? And that is what this is. The council can absolutely choose to do it itself, absolutely, and it can give directions to committee. That's clear as well. But it can't just decide, I don't like it, I don't like what you've done, so I'm going to change what you've told me. It can't do that. It can say, I don't like what you've done, do it again, or I don't like what you've done, do it this way. Or it can say, I don't like what you've done, so I'm going to do it myself. But it doesn't get to just change what the committee has done. The committee has exercised its delegated function legally, right? So the council can't just change it.
So that wasn't my reckons, it was from a legal source, but okay, so anyway, I'll leave that for later. The other question just that I've got for now, so essentially we could be in a perpetual spiral for all time because of this. So we would send it back to the LTP committee, they would go, no, we want you to sell it. It goes back to council, and then our only option then is essentially to say to mana whenua, well, you can't be involved because we're just in this. So there's no way, in other words, of doing this decision where everyone is involved but that we actually resolve it, given that the majority of councillors on this council, as per last council, were opposed to sale. Thank you. Does that mean that we are perpetually going back and forward?
Well, it depends on how the votes fall, councillor. We don't... Yeah.
No, but sorry, I just mean, so if we send it back to the committee and the same vote comes through for sale, then it goes back to council. So our only option literally is to take the power away from the LTP committee. That's what you're saying, just for absolute clarity?
What? I don't think that's a question for us to answer.
Officers, it's obviously open to elected members to vote differently. That is absolutely open to them, and officers can't comment really much further than that.
But just
other than that, the advice we've received is clear.
Okay, so that we would have to change the delegations.
The council can resolve to undertake that function itself, absolutely.
Okay, Councillor Randall.
Thank you. More on the legal stuff. So, in terms of the specific power that's not delegated, that's outlined in the Local Government Act 2002, Schedule 7, Clause 32, Part 1D, that the council cannot delegate the power to adopt the long-term plan.
That's right, and it has not done that.
Okay. Thank you. In terms of powers that have been delegated or not delegated, you mentioned the importance of the council not messing with an audited long-term plan. Has the long-term plan committee got the delegated power to receive the audit report from Audit New Zealand?
Yes, because it can develop the entire long-term plan.
So just unpacking that a little bit more, is it correct that the Audit and Risk Committee does have specifically the delegated power to receive external audit reports, but that is not specified as a delegation on the long-term plan committee?
I don't think it is in the terms of reference. I believe that is correct, Councillor. I don't think in the terms of reference for the long-term plan finance and performance committee it's not, but that is specified. I think, however, and it may be something that we do need to correct in the terms of reference, because for the Audit and Risk Committee, the Audit and Risk Committee itself will typically advise on the annual report audit opinion, because that is in effect looking back and ensuring that things have been correctly represented. In terms of a long-term plan, that is for the council to own, because that is about setting policy. And so potentially that's an area where we need to improve our terms of reference, but yeah.
Okay, and so skipping across, when Councillor Abdurrahman requested officer advice about how best to put forward a notice of motion to change the council majority decision on the sale of the airport shares. Why was the option for the council to simply make a decision different to the long-term plan as it permitted under section 96.3 not outlined in the officer advice back to us?
All right. So, first of all, can I say that was not my recollection of the question that was put to us, but I would just also say that officer advice has been consistent, as is the external legal advice. The most appropriate and lawful way to amend the LTP, to remove the share sale is to amend the LTP. We provided some officer advice yesterday on Section 80, and I note that a public participant has tabled that some comments in relation to that. It is not simply a minor process to just decide to change your mind and do nothing. The external advice and my advice has been clear on that it is not lawfully open to council to merely resolve to act against what you have included in your LTP and do nothing else. There is a significant process to be undertaken, and our advice to you is that the most appropriate way to do that, given what is included in the long-term plan, is to amend the long-term plan.
Okay, so just to be clear.
Last question, Councillor.
Yeah, okay, well, it's sort of the same thing, but I'm happy to go on the list after this. But just to be very clear, I certainly understand the officer advice recommendation around the fact that those two things are the best way forward. But is it still legal for the council to make a decision at variance to the long-term plan under Section 96.3 of the Local Government Act?
Under Section 80 of the Local Government Act, elected members can make a decision that is inconsistent with the long-term plan, because the long-term plan is not actually a decision, it's a statement of intent, right? That's what Section 96 says. So under Section 80, it is absolutely open to elected members to make a decision inconsistent with that long-term plan, but it needs to follow a process. And the advice we have received is that given the significance of the airport and its importance in relation to the financial strategy and the long-term plan, that is not a small process. It is not a process that can simply be undertaken during a meeting. It requires significant officer advice.
Sorry, I didn't
I'm
get a
going to
yes.
have to put you back on the
didn't
list.
get a yes or no. Is it legal? The question is not whether it's best, is it legal?
Provided an appropriate process is followed.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora, and just wanting to, just for the sake of verbal understanding, Standard & Poor's reports, what do they say if we change our financial strategy?
I don't have... I was about to say I don't have the exact wording right in front of me, but Councillor Panovich has just passed it over. One he carries around. Look, we have recently been downgraded by Standard & Poor's, and last year we were put on negative watch. As part of that, they recognised the financial risks and the challenges that we were facing, and they noted that they were sort of monitoring the decisions that were coming out of the long-term plan. We were in the position, because we had a AA+ rating, which was the highest rating in the country, we could afford to go down one notch and not have that impact on our cost of debt. That was commonly known at the time. We have now gone down that one notch, and that's a similar trend to other councils across the motu. But they have also, again, indicated in this report that we have got this financial strategy to address these risks and issues, and they will continue to monitor this. And on that basis, I believe that there is a risk that we could be downgraded. If we were downgraded again, that would result in a change to the cost of our debt because of the the way that the grades work. So that's what our one says. I would note that the New Plymouth District Council is the council now within AA+, because they have got their perpetual investment fund. So that's not to suggest that Standard & Poor's would land in that same position for us. It's just to highlight the kind of metrics that they consider.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Just reading in the media that Treasury has provided advice. Just can you share with us today?
I don't have that advice in front of me, but I have seen that. I do have that in front of me. So just to be clear on that advice was provided to the Minister of Finance in advance of a conversation, I believe, with the Mayor. Yes, talking points meeting with the Mayor of Wellington. They, in their briefing notes, they note that Wellington City Council has modelled a maximum probable loss of around $5 billion in the event of a significant earthquake. And quote, we consider this to be very low, likely formed from the book value of assets, which is the accounting cost and not the economic cost of recovery. And so, their point is that they think our estimates for a probable loss are understated.
I think some other points in that report as well, it's very clear that they are supportive of the Council's intention to explore the establishment of a perpetual investment fund as a way to manage its financial resilience and risk. They also raise a point about local government expectations that central government will continually be there to bail out local government in the situations of natural disasters and that sort of thing, and it's also there was another report of the Treasury's that was released under the OAA to a media outlet, I think, which was also clear that they were doing some work themselves, thinking about how their own exposure or the Crown's balance sheet was also at risk from increasing severe weather events and natural hazards, and that as a result of that, they were thinking about how they were going to manage their liabilities going forward, and that the implication of that, I think, was that you shouldn't necessarily assume that what the Crown has done in the past, the Crown will do in the future.
Councillor Whiringa.
Good afternoon. Hey, I just want to clarify a comment that you made in response to one of the very first questions this session. So it's been made clear to councillors that this is not a vote on whether to sell shares or not. I've got that right. Yeah. But I guess based on a recent conversation that you and I had, I just want to confirm that even if that decision of whether to sell or not were to come in December, the effect seems to be materially the same, namely that we would have to go through a long-term amendment process. Have I got that right?
Yes, that's largely correct, Councillor. I guess the point is that the December meeting allows sufficient time to give the information to you as elected members as to what can be achieved.
Thank you.
We're not in a position to give you that now.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. I have two questions. The first question was, Beth, you mentioned that at the beginning of the triennium, the Council delegated the authority to the Long-Term Plan Finance Committee to look at the long-term plan. So does that mean that the Council can at any time rescind that authority?
Yes.
Right, thank you. And second question is that it's been mentioned and rumoured that Cheong Kong Holdings is interested in the Wellington City Council shares. Now, if they applied for these and were successful, would that need to go to the Overseas Investment Authority? And also, what do you think would be the effect of being partially owned by a foreign company?
So yes, any potential overseas buyer would have to go through an Overseas Investment Act process. Wouldn't want to speculate on what the outcome of that would be or what the potential impact of it would be.
Okay, so we're coming to our next round of questions. It would be good to kind of wrap those questions up, in the next 15 minutes, hopefully less. So if we could please, no repetitive questions. If they've been answered, keep them respectful, respect our staff. Thank you. Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. In the current terms of reference that we have for the Long-Term Plan Committee, Number 3 says develop the council's draft and final long-term plan. That is the final is where the whole thing is playing. And before this triennium, there used to be another committee called Performance and Finance Committee. I was not in the council at the time. But when we approved this, probably it's the first meeting of the council after we get elected. How do you, who wrote this one in such a way, even though we approved it, in the way taking the delegation, removing the delegation from council to the LTP committee?
I couldn't personally comment because I wasn't involved. I do know a team of people discussed the delegations at length with the Mayor and provided professional advice, but I couldn't comment further than that.
Follow-up question is, this is the first time in this triennium where the council delegating this power to another committee. Is there any other time in another triennium where the council delegate that power?
Through you, Mayor, I don't think that's correct. It's very, very common for councils and lawful to delegate significant responsibilities to committees, whether they are committees of the whole or partial committees. And I think you will find throughout the history of this council that has not been uncommon. I certainly know from my many years in local government that it is common throughout the sector.
Thank you, Barbara. My question is still, last triennium, this was not there, and this triennium when we changed the delegation, am I right?
Through you, Mayor, yes, because the governance structure was substantially altered midway through the last triennium as a result of the Windsor review. Those of you who are on the council will recall that there was a redesign of the governance structure, and that structure substantially remained the same in this triennium.
Thank you.
Cool. Councillor Calvert.
When we heard from the public speakers, and I know talking with the public and even what the media reporting, they're reporting about this is about a decision about selling the shares or not. So why do you think people have got that, including councillors, why do you think we've got that impression when it appears now that officers are saying this is not about the sale or not sale of the shares?
I can't answer on behalf of the public, I'm sorry, or on behalf of you, I'm not.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, look, I take the view there's a significant process that would be involved and that amending the LTP is more appropriate regarding Section 97 processes of the LGA, which allow councils to act in a way consistent with its LTP. I guess my question, though, is why at no point was that brought to any of the movers or signatories of the motion that was still a approach that could be used?
I think it was raised in the meeting that we had with you, Councillor McNulty. So during the discussion we had with you in the room, we noted that there was that Section 80 for an inconsistent decision.
It's difference of view there. Look, just in terms of if this nom succeeds, it's clear that there's a direction from council that it doesn't wish to proceed with the sale of the airport. If we ended up in a committee decision that recommended selling the airport, where we might have the chair casting so it's 9-9, and it comes back to council. So this is to Councillor Pannett's question. What I'm asking is, does that situation not bring a high risk of government intervention where a committee and council are perpetually at arguing with each other?
Yeah, I can't answer what central government would do. I think the point around advice to you as elected members is we would build that advice based on the guidance that we're given from you. So that's, you know, we're getting a clear direction here, so we'd bring that advice back to you, including the pros and cons of that advice. It is up to you as the LTP Finance and Performance Committee as to what your preferred option would be. That was decided in December last year. I got my years right, yeah. December last year for the 24-34 long-term plan, and again reiterated again in March when the consultation document was adopted. So that process won't change. It is still a decision for you to make.
And just last question then. obviously it's clear to every single councillor that signed this notice of motion that this represented us no longer wanting to proceed with the sale of the airport, regardless of the fact this kicks off an LTP process. So I guess I'm just confirming officers, if this NOM should succeed, will respect the wish of the council in that regard.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Free. Are you good? Finally, Councillor Randall. And then Councillor Pennant, and then that's it.
Okay. My questions are around the insurance debt headroom now. When the council consulted in the public in the long-term plan, can you confirm that the no sale option put to the public was, the consequence of that was that the council would have to retain an insurance headroom of $272 million?
Sorry, I can't. I'm just trying to recall that detail. I think the amount of the insurance headroom that you decide on what you hold, the 272 was specifically to address the 2021 shortfall and the shortfall that had been calculated. What cannot be done is the shortfall is now within the billions of dollars and a couple of billions of dollars. We do not have the capacity in our debt room to hold that level of insurance headroom. So debt and holding debt headroom is not a sufficient mechanism in itself to address the shortfall. I'm not sure that answers your question though, but I'm just trying to get the clarity of the question.
I just wanted to just confirm what we wrote and consulted the public on in terms of $272 million being the amount of insurance headroom that we would have to retain should we not sell the airport shares.
Well, that was the previous financial strategy, and we recognised that if you did not sell the airport shares, you would need to hold some kind of debt headroom to ensure that you would have an appropriate mechanism to rely on should there be an event that we would need to draw on some funds.
Okay. The second question is, the problem is I've got 4 questions. The second question is the $272 million worth of insurance debt headroom actually retained in the current long-term plan?
From a target perspective, yes. From what we achieve, that is not being achieved currently.
Okay, and thank you. So the new report, thank you for that. The new report on the notice of motion now just says that if we don't sell the shares, officers say that we have to have an alternative insurance debt headroom of $500 to $750 million.
That's not what the paper says. The paper says we would need to do the detailed work behind that, but it has provided a couple of scenarios using 500 million as a proxy. The reason we use 500 million as a proxy is because that was roughly equivalent to the amount that we'd expect to establish the PIF with. So we would still need to do all of the detailed work. We're just trying to give you an understanding of the likely impact and some scenario analysis.
The other reason for those scenarios that were chosen was because between the 2021 LTP, when we had a much lower underinsurance problem, which was sort of more or less matched by the 272, the underinsurance problem has increased about 14-fold since then. And so our advice is that to the extent you can, you must make a meaningful increase in the debt headroom to reflect that very significant increase in risk. And we've modelled a doubling and a tripling just for the sake of having scenarios, but we've also identified that there are a number of other processes that need to be considered in the development of an LTP amendment, including water reform, transport funding, annual plan priorities and that sort of thing. So it's there as an indication of a potential scale of change and to reflect a very significant increase in risk.
Last question.
Yeah. So the last thing is this. These sort of amounts of 500, 700 million is a reasonable amounts of resilience funding that are needed irrespective of whether it's via a diversified fund from selling the shares or from insurance debt headroom. Is that outlined in the long-term plan?
No, because we have a different financial strategy that we're currently operating under and pursuing. What we're being asked to do, if this NOM is successful, is to redo that financial strategy and look at alternative ways to manage the risk. The key here is we have a risk. We need to address that risk and mitigate that risk somewhat. The proposal is to sell the shares and establish a PIF to mitigate that risk. If we cannot use that as an approach, we need to think about other mechanisms. The ones that are likely to be available to us is by increasing debt headroom and or establishing another reserve of funds, but that would probably result in us having to collect rates to be able to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Final questions, Councillor Pennant.
So in California, some building owners won't insure it because it's just too expensive, and that's where we're going. We've known for decades that insurance is going to be a problem, right? Because they actually believe in climate change. The insurers, good on them. So why are we really focused on this? Because we may just have to self-insure. There is a point at which insurance is not affordable, and homeowners are finding that, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So we are doing that through the insurance.
So point of order 26.5A disorder, can we not have conversations running with officer advice, please?
Yes, I'll accept that. Quiet team.
So we, in the insurance roadmap, we're absolutely looking at what assets we will insure in the future. That's a conversation that we need to have, and it needs to be a clear, deliberate conversation, and it needs to be well documented so that people understand what risks we're choosing to take. That's not a decision for officers to make. That is a decision for the governors of this organisation to make. So we're doing that quite deliberate piece of work as part of the insurance roadmap, and that will be quite a thorough process. The other option is though, when we're talking about a significant event, there will be an expectation that we as the City Council have the ability to get up and running almost immediately. We are the organisation that issues building consents and resource consents. We enable the rebuild of our city. And so therefore there has to be some rebuttable presumption that we are going to be ensuring something so that we can actually achieve that function. And so what does that look like? And we are building significant assets across the city, but not expanding on the amount of insurance that we do have. So we're continuing to invest in the city without deliberately being able to expand our insurance to be able to cover all of those assets. So we've got a very real risk that has become an issue that we're trying to manage here.
I'm just following up on one of the questions that I put through Q&A. There wasn't any advice about the alternatives, what we could do with the dividend. Are you just able to cover why you didn't look into that? Just because
what we could do with the dividend, the airport dividend.
Yeah.
So the airport dividend currently goes to offsetting the rates that our residents pay. If we were to use that for another purpose, then we would need to either increase our rates so that we still get that same amount of revenue coming in the door to deliver the current services that we provide, or we need to decrease the services that we provide so that we decrease the cost to us.
Yeah, it was just where the analysis was. Okay. Yeah. And just the last question is what I'm just trying to get my head around the logic. If we sell basically our last two saleable assets, the ground leases and the airport, or most of the ground leases, and we're locking up the money for the future, which I get the rationale, but we're going to have other financial pressures. So what is our next strategy? Because we have nothing left because of the history of the asset stripping.
Well, the intent behind this is that you will have a perpetual investment fund that is of the same or greater value than the value of that airport and the ground leases.
But we're not supposed to touch it every time we've got a financial crisis.
That's right, and nor do we do it now. We're not in a financial crisis now. We're looking at an insurance risk. Okay, so we're not looking at taking money out of that for that purpose at all. We would have that ring fenced, and one of the key things that we would expect to be looking into, and as directed by you, is to ensure how we can protect that fund as much as possible. And that could be to the extent that New Plymouth District Council has gone to and getting a bill across that. That's not intended to ever be used to pay down debt. That would never be my advice to you, as not that I'd be here for forever. But that would not be prudent financial advice for any advisor to give you.
Okay, thank you to our officers for the robust answers. We will now take a 10-minute break for a coffee and so forth, and then we'll come back for debate. everyone, and I hope you had a good break. So, before I hand over to the mover of the notice of motion, I'm just going to remind people to, keep this respectful. We're here to debate the issue at hand. No criticism of staff. I'm going to extend speeches to 4 minutes, and I'm also going to allow people to read speeches off their papers. So let's get the show going. I will now hand over to you, Councillor Abdurrahman, and I believe you have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Randon. Thank you, Mayor Fano. To our public participants, union delegates, media, Wellington City Council staff members, and my fellow councillors. Good afternoon. Today, I'm moving this motion with a great pleasure. This is a very historic notice of motion on behalf of the great Wellingtonians who majority on our side. I'm moving this motion to stop the airport sale for 3 reasons. First, Wellingtonians rejected the sale of the airport. It is also a strategic asset. It's a strategic asset that is giving us a good dividend. When I stood for council, I did so with a promise to protect a public ownership. I'm sure it's something similar for most of my Labour and Green councillors around the table. Today, I intend to keep that promise. This is because public ownership matters. It gives a say in the future of our strategic assets. Once that asset is sold, it is gone forever. This has been the lesson of privatization in New Zealand in the 90s, a good example of electricity that we sold. Wellington Airport is a solid financial investment for our city. Last year, the return was $250 per household, more than 20 million. Importantly, though, at a time of low public trust in our council, I must stress that there is no public mandate for sale. Let me be very clear. The people do not support. A poll released by Union Wellington found 74% of Wellingtonians oppose the airport sale. The sale is opposed by majority of the single and every single council wards. Trust must matter in politics. We are here to represent the public, and when they speak clearly, we must listen. Sadly, this issue has also frayed trust with the council, within the council. It seems every other month we are confronted with a new threat of hundreds of millions of dollars if we don't agree to sell the airport. For some reason, this threat was not there when we approved $147 million for the town hall. I'm sorry, but none of it add up. Trust that has frayed must be rebuilt. It cannot be built on this unpopular, divisive, and unnecessary asset sale. As you will be aware, I'm opposing number 3 of the motion to make sure our mana whenua can have a say at LTP committee. And I'm encouraging you all to vote against number 3 in support of 1 and 2. Only then can we together on the basis of trust, can we work together on basis of trust alongside our mana whenua partners to find the best way forward for our city. Unite, we prevail, divide, we fail. I encourage you all to support this and just keep the public asset in public hands.
Councillor Randall, would you like to speak now?
I'd like to reserve my right, if that's right.
Do I have any other those who would like to debate? I know there are. Councillor Young and then Councillor Chung.
So I wasn't going to speak, but I changed my mind because I saw the sign at the back of the room saying privatisation, why? And it made me realise that many people don't remember what the airport was like before privatisation. Until 1998, which is not that long ago, it was a World War II de Havilland hangar which had pigeons and seagulls flying all through it. And it had no retail in it. It just had a sign saying tipping is not expected in New Zealand. So we've come a long way since then at the airport, thank goodness. I remember coming into Wellington Airport when the airport had opened in 1998, and I was just gobsmacked that we had finally joined the first world. So I have to say I fully support the sale of the council's minority shareholding. A minority shareholding is a complete waste of time other than the fact that you may get a dividend, because it is also a very vulnerable asset. And I do believe in diversification of risk. It is, to me, crazy to have all our assets in Wellington. So for me, this is not about privatisation, but it's actually about trust, because I'm not confident in the protection around the sale proceeds. And I'm obsessed with council's profligacy and rising debt levels. So this council loves spending your money. And I'd be delighted if this passes and it gets passed by council and we have to cut some projects. I'd be delighted because we need to stop spending your money so extravagantly. So I will be supporting the notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chung.
Thank you very much. My basic platform in coming into council is that you listen to your constituents, you listen to what they want, you listen to what they say, and then do as they say. We're not here for our own egos, some of us may be, but we're here to listen to our constituents. Now, they are telling us, unequivocally telling us, that they don't want to sell the airport. And so why are we even looking at that? So is it because we think that we know more than they do? It's wrong. So we should follow what they want. The thing is, we've heard a lot of talk about the fact that we only have 34%, so therefore it's a minority holding in the airport, and so you can't do anything with a 34%. But what happens if the people that buy it, and I'm very concerned about who actually comes in to buy it. Now, we've heard about Infratil and what Infratil may do. Now, Infratil would be the least of my concerns. What I'm more concerned about is someone else comes in, some overseas purchaser comes in and buys it. Sure, they'll buy a minority holding, but once they've got it, do you think if they make a good enough offer to Infratil, do you think that Infratil would actually decline it? So before you know it, they'll control that asset. And so once they control that asset, what can you do? You look at what's happening in the Pacific now. You look at what's happening to foreign countries when they come in, build infrastructure for these island countries, and then they know that those countries can't ever pay them back the money, so they end up owning them. So is that a risk that's worth taking? I say no, definitely not. And so we shouldn't be looking at selling our prime assets here. We can't rely on something happening in the future that may or may not happen, and I'm talking about earthquakes, of course. And so it may come, it may not come, but to sell it because we think that an earthquake is going to hit us and we're going to need that money won't be anywhere near enough what we need. You've heard Mr. Ridley-Smith earlier on. What if we get 400 million or something for it, 500 million? It doesn't matter what it is, but it will never, ever become the billions that we need to rebuild the city. And so never, ever will it actually get there. And so what's the point of actually doing it? It's too big a risk. I'm going to vote for this notice of motion, and I would implore all of you to actually do so too. Thank you.
Councillor Whiringa-ā-nuku.
Tēnei te mi kia koutou katoa. I'd like to offer a mihi to everybody who's in the room today, to public, to people who have spoken, and to the chiefs which addressed us at the end of the table. I think the level of concern and the extent of public participation, because of, frankly, the two separate issues on the table today, actually does our city credit. I think what it proves is that Wellingtonians care about public ownership and that Wellingtonians care about treaty partnership. However, it is with a lot of pain that I observe who is not in the room today. My iwi is not in the room, and part of the responsibility for that fact lies with me, and that's not a fact that I take lightly. A chief of Taranaki has addressed us here today, and I think somebody around this table has to do him the decency of replying to his call for unity and his expression of hurt which this council has caused, and I intend to do that now. I won't reiterate my strategic arguments for the preservation of public ownership of Wellington City Council's shares in Wellington Airport. From the environmental to the workers' rights, to the democratic, to the strategic, to the financial, my views on this matter are a matter of very public with respect to that front desk record. However, if we are going to win on this issue, and I believe we will and we must, it becomes us to win on values. There is a right way to win, and there is a wrong way, to win. And I feel that the bringing of this motion to Council with Clause 3, which with its disenfranchising implications for our Kaunihera partners, is the wrong way to win. I refer to Standing Order 21.4, wouldn't be a Whiringa-ā speech without a reference to the standing orders, which states that a motion can be withdrawn with the leave of the meeting. Therefore, I would like to ask the mover and this meeting that this motion be please withdrawn for the sake of our Kaunihera partners. I'd like to reflect actually on my own failings as part of this process. If I could characterize the process with a single word, it would be misunderstanding. Crossed wires, people not picking up the phone, emails shooting back and forth without an appropriate CC. So many miscommunications at every step of the process, which could have been solved by the concerned parties simply getting in a room together. As Māori Ward Councillor, I represent the bridge between the institution and tangata whenua. Therefore, the responsibility to facilitate this coming together ought to have been mine, and I have failed. I'd also like to reflect on my own naivete in appreciating the effect of Clause 3 of this motion. Yes, it is true that only Council by law can sell a strategic asset. Yes, it is also true that if we were to wait until December, we would effectively waste millions of dollars for a vote that could otherwise be taken today. That is true, with the same effect. However, in proactively affirming Council's supremacy, rather than simply accepting it as a consequence of the colonial institution in which we participate, we have transgressed in our relationship with mana whenua. So all I can really do at this point is take responsibility for these failings. And if the motion is indeed put, which I fear it will be, but I'm holding out hope until the last minute, as I'm wont to do, all I can do is apply my best judgment to the words that are put on the paper before us. I fear we've reached a point of opposing trenches where nuanced views are not possible and cooler heads cannot prevail, although I do acknowledge that some people have been trying to solve this right up until the very last moment. And I count myself amongst these some. And to reiterate, I believe that there is a right thing and it can be done right now, or in sort of 5 minutes or so. elements, of this motion may indeed pass today, and as I sincerely hope, Clause 3 with its disenfranchising implications may fail, and mana whenua may be able to be part fully of the process to amend our long-term plan. However, the problem, based upon which that Chief of Taranaki addressed us, is that iwi have been used as a football for the past month, which is totally contrary to the mana enhancing principles which underlie our Tākaihere partnership. I want to make that exceedingly clear. And in making it clear, I want to accept my own share of the responsibility for this month and the way that this has come to us. But I repeat, it is not too late to do the right thing. So let us win on this, opponents of this shocking airport sale. Let us win, but let us win in the right way. Let us win according to the tikanga of this institution. Let us win according to the principles of our treaty partnership. And let us win in a manner consistent with the values of the Wellingtonians in this room today. I will leave it to the mover in the meeting to decide the next steps. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, Councillor. I will ask at this point if an adjournment is required by either the mover or Councillor Whiringa-ā. Proceed. Okay. Councillor Apanowicz.
Thank you, Mayor Whānau. As you know, I'm not one for long speeches, so 4 minutes could be too long. We'll find out. I'd acknowledge the words of Councillor Whiringa-ā. I'll acknowledge the mistakes that this council has made. I respect our iwi partners. We did a process with the long-term plan, and I am the deputy of that committee. And although people may forget, but we did actually have 300 submitters here. We did have 400 written responses. We did listen to what people did. We voted both at the long-term plan committee and also at this council. Now we are trying to pick apart that decision. We are trying to re-litigate all those processes. We have created conspiracy theories where there is none. We have created a lack of trust in our officials, which is not acceptable. We do have insurance risks. They are evident. If you look at your own insurance policies, you will see the reasons for that. You will look at the Standard & Poor's document, which talks about our debt, talks about our levels of capital expenditure, talks about our risks, talks about our financial strategy. Read it. I did. I gave it to our CFO. We are only a minority shareholder in this asset. We only have two sort of assets. We can't own both of them and still have an ability to at least mitigate some of our insurance risk. And the other thing I'd like to say as well, we are now actually meant to be moving into an annual plan process. That annual plan process starts with a 13% rate increase. Where do you think that will go if this motion passes? And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rogers.
Kia ora, councillors, kia ora, colleagues. Thank you very much to members of the public. I did have something written, but I like to tell my colleagues that I like to keep it as debate rather than speeches, and in that matter, respond to what's said at the table and try and influence votes. I do really want to thank Councillor Whiringa-ā for your reflection on this process. I think for many this process has been painful, and I can stem that back to, as highlighted, the inclusion of point number 3. And I frankly remember when the notice was originally presented to me, and the first thing I pointed to with the mover was point number 3. And we had this discussion recently this week, and that's why in this debate I wanted to reflect on the statement of that mover, which was, "United we prevail, divided we fail." We have had a long-standing commitment here with our Tākaihere partnerships. Yes, Tākaihere might only be 5 years old, but there are also descendants of people who signed Te Tiriti that walk among us, that established the roots for that partnership to come to fruition. And so I would like to support my colleague in asking for this motion to be withdrawn. I think mana whenua have made it very clear in their emails to us that they believe the most appropriate way is for this to be withdrawn. And as you heard today, they're very happy to hear the debate and for the debate to be had about the airport shares and whether they are sold or whether they are not. But I do reflect that there is a right way for things to be done, and it is important to hold ourselves to higher standards than the bare minimum set by this government and the bare minimum standards that this central government seems to be following. It's incredibly important to me, I think, that we hold on to our Te Tiriti partnership when it is easy and when it is hard. And that was echoed in debates from many people, some of whom even signed this motion when we were talking about the Māori ward. And so I do think it is important that we have this debate on our insurance risk. And I think it is incredibly important that it centres on that itself, the risk that we have as a city if there is an earthquake. But right now I do believe the most appropriate next step is for this motion to be withdrawn and for us to have this conversation in a very open, transparent and constructive way with not just everyone at this table today, but also with our mana whenua partners.
Kia ora, Councillor. I will put myself on the list. I acknowledge that, you know, with this decision today, there's been a lot of angst, there's been a lot of hurt toward each other and toward our iwi partners. And I'd like to think that this is not a space that we actually want to be in. We do not want to be here. Could this process have been done better? Absolutely. I think we've identified some parts in which I could have done better, we as a group could have done better. And I hope we can all agree that we can certainly do better by the people of Wellington. Regardless of today's vote, you know, I agree with you, Councillor Abdurrahman, and I agree with, of course, Kara Puketapu. And the way we move forward, we have to refocus on the best way we can deal with Wellington's challenges. But we also have to accept and understand that we have different views here and some really difficult decisions to make. This will not be the last. In terms of today, I've made my, disappointment clear that with the decision proceeding without mana whenua is not right. It's not about the decision itself. It's how we got here. And you might not agree with the outcome of the LTP or mana whenua's views, but that doesn't mean we should purposely exclude them. Partnership is respecting everyone's views, including where you disagree. You know, where I like to see this, and again, I'm hearing Kara's words and taking them very seriously. There is a lot of division across Aotearoa, especially in politics, not just here. It would be great if we could be different, if we could do better. And for the sake of our relationship with mana whenua and tākai here and truly honouring Te Tiriti, I agree that the motion should be pulled and that we take this decision on the airport back to the December decision and do it right. Councillor Whiringa, I fully tautoko the words that you have spoken, and I thank you for your part in rebuilding our relationship with mana whenua. This would be another part to that. So that is my ask in the first instance, with the greatest respect to Councillor Abdurrahman. If we don't do that and it goes to a vote, of course, I cannot support the NOM. The arguments about the airport sale have been pretty well traversed and well publicised, so I don't intend to go back over them again. But I do look forward to us being able to refocus back on the bigger issues that Wellington is facing. We still have water, climate, housing in our community to worry about. But let's do that in a mana-enhancing way. So thank you, and thank you to the mover. That is my view, but I welcome anyone else to speak. Councillor Free.
I would like to wait. I'm just getting a bit more information, but I do want to be on the list. If I'm the only person. Okay.
Councillor Matthews.
This is the game of chicken that takes place where nobody wants to speak because everybody wants to speak after everybody else. But I'm willing to go. I just want to acknowledge that the decision around the airport sale has been difficult for many of us. And it was difficult for me. I know many of you have agonised with it. I voted against the sale in good faith. We face very difficult circumstances where there are no easy options. That is the reality of local government and where the challenges that we have as a city. Today is less difficult for me because I take the role as a partner in Kaunihera seriously. It means something to me. And, you know, Kara talked about the hoi behind me, that the same hoi are with Ngāti Toa, Rangatira, and with Taranaki Whānui, and this means something. We are having this debate here, and it was known before because it's a numbers game, and that the number to kind of defeat the airport sale was here if you do not count our mana whenua reps. To me, that represents a cynicism which I don't share. And I support mana whenua having a vote and a say on our key decisions, even when I disagree with them. And I think back, to the various iterations of the district plan in the last term, where Liz, voted differently than me, and her vote was very decisive. I never thought she shouldn't have a vote because I didn't agree with her or because I lost because of it, even though those issues for me about the housing future of our city are actually deeper to me and more important than who owns a minority stake in the airport. So that debate is happening because of the numbers. And so again, I make the call, please, please, please withdraw this. It is only a matter of weeks till December where we can make this decision as a council and vote again. I want to personally apologise. Councillor Whiringa, I appreciate the responsibility you took as the chair of the LTP committee. I have responsibilities too. I really wish we could have come through this process with less pain. I look back and think about the consultation document and that there should have been more information. And I take my responsibility for that too. None of us is perfect. But many of us over recent weeks have been showing the worst of politics, not the best. And we have an opportunity today to show a better side of ourselves to our city. I was there when we signed Kaunihera. I know how our organisation has been transformed by it in a very short number of years. And I want us to do better and know better than just knowing how to count and a number of votes around a table, that this is more important. So please, please withdraw the motion. If not, I will be voting against it. I'm very sorry that we are here today.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Free.
Yes, I think a lot of what I want to say has been said, and thank you to Councillor Matthews, Councillor Rogers, Councillor Whiringa. This is a very cynical move, incredibly cynical. We have the right as council to make the decision on sale of assets. In fact, it must come to council. The numbers are either there or not there, but we haven't gone through the process. Now, you know that I stick by process, and it stood me in good stead. We've had court challenges, we've had lots of challenges for our community, and generally we've come through them because of robust process. This is not a robust process. This is undermining the very people who have been here the longest in this land and will continue to have an enduring relationship with our city. And when they say that they want money, they value having an insurance fund more than they value having an airport. They think we should sell the airport. They think we should have a perpetual fund to rebuild the city in which their history and their future is connected. And you cynical people around the table, and it's not like me to address my fellow colleagues like this, but you cynical people have taken an opportunity to try and short-circuit the process, and there's been lies told in that as well. The estimate that I've just received for the cost that this would take, you know, I've been told this is about saving council money. We don't want to waste money because the votes are going to be going one way. Predetermination, if I ever heard about it. And the amount of money, 400 to 600K between now and December to find out what's actually on the table. We don't yet know. We may have no buyers at all. In fact, the way you guys have been talking about Wellington and the way you've been talking about the airport, you're downgrading and devaluing our asset. And furthermore, you know, there's been very experienced people who've talked about the reasons to sell. One of the reasons is that airport's going to need big money. They're rebuilding their southern wall. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. They've got to rebuild the western wall. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. We're 34% in that partner, but we have no real control. If the airport wants to do that, they're going to say to us, stump up your third. And if we can't stump up our third, they'll be diluting our shareholding because they'll have to go out to the market to find people who can stump up. We're actually running the risk of devaluing our most significant asset that we've got. And an airport is not a public asset, I'm really sorry. And as Councillor Young said, it's actually better than it was before. So not only is this, there are really, really good reasons why we should at least consider this with the information on the table instead of making a predetermined reason and cynically moving to seize something that you wouldn't otherwise be doing. Somebody said, you want to win, but not at any cost. This is the dirtiest politics I've been involved in since I've been on this council. It is dirty. And I'm sorry, but I have to say that. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McNulty.
Kia ora. I'd like to start by thanking Kara, the public participants and all the councillors around this table. This is a difficult conversation, but it's important. Many points have been raised, but I'm just going to focus on the key reason we are here. It is only the council who can sell strategic assets, such as the airport. That is the law and the framework in which we operate. The council is opposed to the sale of the airport shares, and therefore the process must cease. I'll remind you, when the long-term plan was passed in June, it was done so despite a majority of councillors having made public their opposition to the sale. There was no opportunity in that point at June to vote or voice that opposition. 4 months later, that majority continues, and even today, after 3 previous attempts to bring this to the table, a simple, clean resolution on the airport is still not possible. If this notice of motion is successful, Mayor Whānau, I ask you lead us in moving this council on. Accepting the support for the sale is simply not there. To our iwi who have spoken today, I appreciate the free and frank views that you've expressed, and I thank you for doing such. This is the first serious disagreement under tākāhere, and it is not one I personally take in any way lightly. I do hope that Ngāti Toa and Taranaki Whānui that you'll continue to remain at this table and hold our feet to the fire. I know that myself and other signatories of this motion have diligently tried to avoid the need for today's debate while sticking true to the principles and the values on which we were elected. And to that end, we instigated negotiations with the Mayor in which we were willing to consider a partial sale despite our ardent opposition. Until yesterday, on behalf of several councillors, I was navigating trying to bring a new motion that would not include the disenfranchising language of Clause 3. We will clearly vote down Clause 3 and ensure that the LTP amendment process has our mana whenua reps at the table for all those committee decisions should they choose to do so. We asked the chair of the LTP committee to assist us in drafting a motion. We offered even to the Mayor a referendum or a delay so that the airport could be debated in next year's elections and could emerge with a public mandate to move forward. And I'm gutted. None of those were able to stack up, and we've landed here instead in a debate which sucks. But I just hope through this you can see the genuine efforts that have been made. I do want to close with a whakatauki, and I hope this is something we can think of moving forward. Waiho I te toipoto, kaua I te toiroa. Let us keep close together, not far apart.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Kia ora. Can I just ask for the Q&A to be tabled, please? Yep, kia ora. I do want to start by acknowledging that as many of us have today, how difficult this situation has been for all of us, and understanding that we all have a different lens that we're coming from that has landed us in the situation today. I want to acknowledge Councillor Whiringa for your kōrero and your calls to let's win. I understand that, but let's win in the right way and have our values represent, for those in this room, that to base that on the foundations that we come to this table with. And I want to acknowledge our Pōiwi representatives who are not with us today, Pōiwi Liz Kelly and Holden Hohaia. This process has caused significant pain and it's been very hard for them. And this table is richer for what they bring, their view and their knowledge and wisdom that helps our decision making. And I want you to know how much I appreciate you, and I know that we all appreciate you and the mahi that you bring. But I think this notice of motion, I will be calling for it to be removed as well, because it has moved beyond the issue. It represents a trampling of our tākaihere's mana, and that their voices were not to be included as we go forward in this decision making. I hear Karapuki Tapu and your call on us to lead with collective collaboration and show Wellington how we can move forward together. And I ask that we join the values in unity, peace and hope. And I must say that I was there too when we signed the Tākaihere agreement, and there's never been a prouder day in my life on council, or actually in my life. I've never been so proud, but actually if this NOM goes through as it will today, if it does today, I will be ashamed of this council. And I ask us, my fellow councillors, if we knowingly block the voice of our Indigenous people, and our partners even more that we have invited into the partnership, what are we saying to the world? What are we saying to New Zealand? What are we saying to 78 local governments across the nation who viewed us as leaders in this space? What are we saying to our youth council today who said that understanding and working with Te Tiriti was the most important work that they had? What are we showing that next generation? What will the benchmark we set for the councils to come after us if we go forward with this? So I ask you today, it's not too late to change the outcome. I am asking you to withdraw this whole notice of motion, please. And if it is not, I cannot support it for the reasons that I've outlined. Kia ora.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to start off by saying that I want to sell the shares in the airport. I accept the argument that they're at risk, and this city is at risk of a major earthquake and always at risk, of course, of a major storm. We've experienced both in the past. But I want to first note the disappointment that we've turned a discussion about the sale of the airport shares and about the resilience of the city into a debate about the partnership we have with Maori, the strong partnership we have, and the potential disrespect we've done with this, all due to officers' legal advice about the delegations that are occurred in this council. And I want to note the points made by Paul Ridley-Smith, Dr. Dean Knight and others that dispute this legal information that the council does not have final say on its long-term plan. Under Schedule 7, Section 32, 1D. And I also wish to table the information from Paul Ridley-Smith towards that argument, because I'm here to debate what was put forward in the long-term plan on whether to sell the airport shares or not. In the long-term plan consultation, to sell the airport shares meant that we did not need the $272 million of insurance headroom. The sale of the shares was enough for our resilience funding. The no-sale option meant the retention of $272 million of our emergency fund. I did not want and did not support the sale of the shares to go and spend and take on more debt. That was the condition that I and other councillors, a few other councillors, had to make the majority for selling the airport shares. That condition was to retain the $272 million of insurance, because this was a discussion about diversifying risk, not about spending airport share money. And that was accepted. And inside the long-term plan, there is an insurance debt headroom limit of $272 million. However, we've spent that funds. We've spent that money. In fact, we've now got a report that says we need to have, if we don't sell the shares, $500 million in insurance headroom, which I find very, very odd. The goalposts have moved after we've consulted the public, after we made the initial decisions on selling airport shares. And I find it totally bewildering that in year 3 we need to find $500 million of airport shares when this year, you know, it's in a resilience fund planned for the long-term plan, $120 million. Next year, how much have we put aside in the long-term plan for an emergency, for an earthquake? What's left after we've spent the money? $40 million. And yet on year 3 we have to have $500 million. It does not make sense to me. It's an unconvincing argument, I'm afraid, and for that reason, I support this notice of motion to do it again.
Final points, please, Councillor.
So, for me, this is actually about revisiting the long-term plan, no sale option. It's about keeping the resilience fund of $272 million. That will require some cuts, absolutely. Not the 400 to 600 million outlined in the report, though. Maybe 200 million. Some hard decisions. We are embarking on a path for hard decisions. But everyone around the council knows that. And so for this reason, we really need to support the notice of motion. We really need to just go and redo the decision. So please support it, except for part 3.
Councillor Pennant.
Kia ora, Madam Mayor. So I want to, well, it wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about climate change. So I'm going to talk about climate change, the biggest issue facing our planet. I believe that public ownership and environmental protection go hand in hand. People have been a bit confused about why I would support a dirty, polluting asset. The owners, which continuously want to build motorways through my ward. Well, the answer is quite simple. If we are going to control emissions, we need to partly own this asset and we need to oppose their growth plan. Big capital destroys not only workers' rights but the climate, and we have to be a brake. The government, particularly when they're Conservative, and the ETS are inadequate, and even our role as regulator, as we heard today, will not work. All we have at the end of the day is land. We are not, as the ideologues of the 80s and 90s would say, all rootless. There is society. We are located in a place, whatever our culture and heritage is, there are different ways of looking at it. And we need to retain control of our land. It is also, of course, a monopoly. It is valuable. We are at the bottom of the world. This is the easiest way to get out of it. It's essentially a license to print money, although, as I've just said, I think it needs to be controlled. If you believe that this should be sold, why not sell everything? I mean, the roads would be quite good too. You could make quite a lot of money, particularly you people who love to drive a lot. So, so there's and selling the family silver is a ridiculous argument because there will be another crisis and there's nothing else left to sell. On the issue of risk and insurance, one which is very important to me, I don't believe one fund is enough. We need to be diversifying even more. And the insurance argument is also illogical. And colleagues have rightly pointed this out. We will need many, many billions of dollars to deal with the crises that are coming up. And mitigating against climate change and earthquakes is the best way forward. I also support the comments of Councillor Chung around national security. Whether it is Britain, France, China, the US, we need to control our own destiny. Giving up our strategic assets just does not make sense. And finally, I too grieve that we have had this process. As Councillor McNulty has said, we have tried to resolve it, and we were not allowed to, at the end of the day. And the problem we've got now is that we could be in an endless cycle of doom of going between the LTP committee and the council. There is just no way out of it now without changing the delegations, which is problematic. So, yep, that is not good. But we do have disagreements. This is a democracy, and I certainly did not actually sign up for unity 100% of the time. Disagreement is critical. If the status quo is going to change, it must be challenged. Kia ora.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. Listen to me. As Einstein said, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? And that's why when I became aware of facts in June and subsequently to, I changed my mind about my support for the sale of the shares. So I just want to thank all those people in Wellington who have provided us with further information, not only about their personal views, but also their expertise around insurance, financing, risk, conflicts of interest, and the law by which we are here able to make decisions on selling an asset owned by the people of Wellington. A majority around this table have strongly signalled since June that we do not want the sale of the shares to proceed. However, even in June, when we had an LTP committee and with the council, there was no mechanism for us to reverse that decision by all accounts. And I just want to acknowledge my colleagues, Councillor Abdurrahman, Councillor McNulty, Councillor Whiringa-ā-nuku, and Councillor Randall on trying to work through and say, how can we make this happen? And going to officers and working through, and I know it took about 6 weeks to try and get an agreed notice of motion and the wording with that, working with officers, working with each other, and I thought that was really good, and that's why we are here today. I also just want to point out, since the start of this triennium, this council has consistently spent more and more money on new projects. We've had Thorndon Quay put before us, we've had the Golden Mile put before us, we've even had Reading Cinemas deal put before us. And look where that got us. We've had multiple chances to get the books in order, but we haven't. Because why? Because there was knowledge that the sale of the airport shares would enable us to carry on this spending. And that's my biggest fear, that we will carry on the spending even more so. So stopping the sale of the shares will require this council to do what it should have done in the first place, prioritise its projects better. And that's what we also heard from the Unions Wellington. and ensure that Wellington's hard-earned dollars are spent wisely, because this is not our money. And I think Councillor Young mentioned it. This is Wellingtonians' money, and it's also their asset. And so over the past 2 years, this council, through its decisions, through what's happened around this table, has lost the public's trust and confidence. And it's going to take some time to restore that. It won't be restored over the next few months. But the public have been quite clear that they do not want this council to sell their shares. And as their representatives, we must respect their wishes. And so I will be supporting this notice of motion, and as some of my colleagues have identified, I won't be supporting number 3. Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Nā mihi noi ki te mana whenua o rangatere, taranaki whānui, Ngāti Toa. As Tauiwi, I recognise my place standing here is only legitimised by Te Tiriti of Waitangi. My background is as an activist, and we understand that everything you do on this land, whether it be advocacy for people, for climate, for nature, for youth, for the future, must be done under the consideration of this fundamental law. Something that is really important to me is that I always try to act consistently with my principles and values. It has been a strongly held value of mine not to sell public assets. At the time of signing this notice of motion, I believed that it would be bringing forward simply the legal decision that Council has to stop the sale of shares in the December meeting. Following the revelation that Resolution 3, sitting with Pauiwi reps, sitting with the Mayor, sitting with officers, sitting with my colleagues, and understanding the harm and mamai that Resolution 3 has done to the Takai Here partnership is incredibly regretful. I wish to acknowledge this poor process. I wish to accept my part of the responsibility of signing the notice of motion with Resolution 3 and not being more critical about whether or not Resolution 3 belonged there. Following the understanding of this, been trying to work incredibly closely with several different camps around the council. I have conveyed my concerns, I have gone to ground, I have called up family members, I have consulted my community, I have rung up people that I trust to seek their advice on this, and I've also conveyed my concerns to the mover of the motion, who has listened. But ultimately, up until yesterday, it appeared that irregardless of what myself or any of the other signatories do, once the notice of motion is lodged, the only person that may withdraw it is the mover of the motion. So accepting that I cannot change the fact that the notice of motion is coming today, I moved on to the next part of the decision, which was how I was going to vote on Resolution 1 and 2. I agree with the statements of Kara this morning that this council lacks collectivism. I believe that the situation has highlighted the need to be working on our relationship consistently, and I want to reaffirm my commitment to the Tākāhere relationship. Considering all the processes I've gone through, it is my conclusion that I will be voting to support Resolution 1 and 2 today.
We now move to right of reply, Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora whānau. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the difficulty Councillor Whiringa trying to navigate through. And that is why, from the beginning of the motion where we moved, I tried my best to work with him and to make adjustments. And to that point, we tried to move amendment to number 3. But the advice we got is that it will be ambiguous to move it. So that is why today I'm asking you all to vote against number 3. And when we started this, it was not our intention to exclude mana whenua. However, some of you seems to be using our Takaheri partnership as a weapon for your airport sale position. I don't think that's a good idea. I want to acknowledge again the Manawhenua. It's true there is a pain that we inflicted as part of this. I really want to work on that. We need to heal it, but it's not cynical move from us. It is about understanding the standing order. It's about understanding the term of reference. It's about understanding the local government limitations. When some of you speak today, it seems like we, because of this motion, excluding Manawhenua reps sitting around this table. No, according to Local Government Act, council is only for elected councillors. If there is a way to change that, bring it and see who's going to be supporting. I will be one of them. But it has to change from the Local Government Act. The central government is the only party that can do that. So it is about understanding our standing order. Some of you seems to be angry about this, and I think it will be genuine to point out exactly why you're supporting the airport. That would be like, that's the best way to approach this instead of playing the game of a very dangerous environment. I tried my best to reach out to our Manawhenua representatives. I sent an email to work on the wording, and I'm still willing to work in that space. However, one thing is very clear. It is okay to have different views with our Manawhenua partners who sit around the table. It's a partnership. There is no way we can always say we have to agree with someone who's sitting here. We need to respect that Takaheri partnership. I respect their views. I would love to work with them. Holden is actually one of Matwa that I really looked up to it. He's a really nice guy that I love working with around this table. I know this made a little bit of pain for all of us. Auntie Liz, actually when she went to London, more than any one of you, she brought a gift because she knows I love football. She brought me an Arsenal souvenir. So I already know them and we are working together. But instead of you all contributing towards the healing process, today you are contributing towards the more damage. The pain is not only one way again. I felt the pain through this process because I didn't want to do this to our Manawhenua partners who are sitting around the table. But that's the only option we have to stop the airport. And then when we realized number 3 is the problem, we said, okay, let's change number 3. And that's why I'm asking you today to vote against number 3 and stop the saga about airport by voting number 1 and 2. And I encourage you all to be brave enough to have different views and making these decisions. Let's go and vote. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to vote on everything separately. So clause 1 and 2. Can we vote 2 together? Everything separately?
And
Yeah.
Can we just vote number 3 first and then vote the rest? As a
I think everything separately.
Can we have clause 3 first?
Yep, I'm asking clause 3 number.
Yes?
Yep.
Yes? Okay. Okay.
Hey, Tori, how do I vote?
That's not how it sounds.
That's what we have.
Come on, Councillor. No. So, do you know where the chat screen is over Teams?
Yep, I use chat, do I?
Yep, so it's yes or no. But of course...
Okay, sure.
So if you do not support the nom, you vote no. If you support the nom, you vote yes.
Thank you.
But we're taking it bit by bit.
And,
yes.
And to make it clear, I'm asking everyone to vote no for number 3, yes for the rest.
Clause number 3, vote. that has failed. We are now going back to number 1, clause 1. And that has passed. Go. Is it? 9.
Nope, it's passed. 9 to 7. Take photo.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no, I see what's happened. Clause 2. Just 2, and then we'll go to 2A. And that has passed. 2A. And that is passed. 2B. 2B. Casting vote. Okay. Oh, so that's no.
No, vote against.
Vote against. Yeah, that has failed. 2C. Very weird. And that has passed. And clause 4. And that has failed. Casting vote.
It's all right. It's okay. We don't need it. We don't need it.
And that is done. Okay. Before I wrap up the meeting, I do want to say a couple of things. Democracy has spoken. Votes are where they are. And I do want to make a promise that, you know, we have to work collaboratively moving forward on this decision. And what I would ask of councillors is that, yes, it's been a yucky few weeks, but let's accept what has happened and let's come back together. There's probably going to be some ill feelings for a while, and that's okay. But Wellington comes first. We have to do the best by Wellington. That will mean some difficult decisions as a result of this. We will need to look at more cuts. But I think, as a collective, we can do that and still get the best out of Wellington. I do think we've got some repairing to do with iwi. We've got some major repairing to do. And if I could request moving forward that we be a bit more accurate with some of our statements. Yeah. We be more accurate. I've heard some things that are simply not true, but I'm still going to accept where the decision has gone. Okay? Karakia, and then we'll go. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia māma, tēnā kau, te tinana, te E te arataka tū, ko ia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia.